And we are live. Welcome back. This is episode number 62 of Kalibrated with Scott. I'm Scott, of course. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's just hop right into it. The counteroffensive. There is nothing really to talk about with the Ukrainian side of the counteroffensive. Mostly all we've seen is, pinprick attacks behind the Russian rear lines, nothing really getting done in the Zaporozhye front. If you move to the Bakhmut front, the Russians have actually counterattacked around Klishchivka and have pushed the Ukrainians back from around just south of Andriivka, which is south of Klishchivka. The Ukrainians have made some slight progress just to the north of Klishchivka, but very, very minor stuff. I think they entered a new tree line, which is, has its relevance. But, in totality, the Ukrainian counteroffensive really just has not panned out at all. There has been nothing happening, no major assaults lately. It kind of seems like the offensive is either in a transitional phase, which I don't really know where it goes from here. They've already gone through one or two transitional phases, switched up their tactics, have done different things. There's just really nowhere to go. So from here on out, I believe that the Ukrainians will be on the defensive, and I believe that they will be on the defensive in the LPR. In the LPR/Kharkov region, in between the Zhyvyets River and the Oskal, where, about 2 weeks ago, I had said the Russian offensive had begun, and it had. These forces had crossed the Zhyvyets River, mostly Storm Z infantry units. Storm Z is the infantry units that are prisoners, mostly made up of prisoners who are released from military service. They crossed this river. They have held the bridgehead across this river for a good amount of time. And now up to the north, above where this river crossing was, the Russians are increasing pressure significantly around the Kupiansk area, coming down from the north. So the whole bulge, and I'll put up a map right here so you can see it, this whole bulge is getting pressured from multiple different sides. And if the road just outside of Kupiansk is cut by the Russians, then the Ukrainians in this bridgehead, basically, just east of the Oskal River, will have an incredibly difficult time maintaining logistics and will probably be forced to retreat. We're getting a lot of rumors that Kupiansk is being evacuated of civilians and of all non-military personnel. Or non-critical personnel, I guess. I don't really know. It's just, like I said, rumors at this time. We're also getting rumors from people in Kupiansk that are saying they can hear the fighting getting closer and closer. It appears that the Russians are about 3 kilometers away at this time. By the time this is uploaded, that might have changed. I am recording late on August the 9th. It's 8 p.m. right now. So morning time in Ukraine, nighttime for me. And as of right now, the Russians are making advances. The Ukrainians are on the back foot. I've seen reports from pro-Russian sources. These are not Ukrainian sources, and I have no way of actually figuring out which units are in this area, just because I'm not as hyper focused on that. There are some accounts out there that are extremely good with recognizing which brigades are in what area, which units are in what area. But from the looks of it, and from what I'm hearing from sources that are, monitor that very closely, is that the Ukrainians have pulled out all of their special forces and territorial defense brigades from this region, and now basically light mechanized infantry remain. So they're getting ready for, it looks like, a withdrawal to me. It would probably be the right decision. And really what it comes down to is the Russians have reserves. The Russians didn't just expend themselves in Zaporozhye extremely hard. And the Ukrainians really had to decide, do they want to defend all of the territory they have left, or did they want to concentrate on this all or nothing offensive? They went for the all or nothing offensive. It didn't pan out. It is now August 9th. So we are D plus 67 now. And that means that the I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say once again that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed. I don't see how it's going to make progress. We haven't even seen strikers or challengers yet. These brigades are not being even deployed to the front lines. So, the 9th and 10th Corps have been pretty chewed up. There's just not anything going the right way. There was even a river crossing in Kherson with about 50 people and 7 boats. Really not anything major, but another, attempt, I guess, and that was shut down. They still maintain some of the islands, but really nothing of any significance towards the actual battlefield in Zaporozhye or Kherson. And yeah, so it doesn't seem like anything is going the right way. I'm still keeping my eyes on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. I think that the idea was that the Ukrainians would have much more success in the offensive, and then this crossing of the Dnieper River or the Novokakhovka Reservoir would occur, and then they would gain the strategic position and nuclear power plant across the reservoir from Ukrainian territory. But that didn't end up happening, and I think those plans were kind of called off. Just because of how strong the Russian position is, any river crossing would have just been destroyed. It just literally annihilated. So outside of a suicide run, I don't see them going for the nuclear power plant. They can't even get through Robitny right now. And that's a major concern. I mean, that's a couple kilometers away from your starting positions. They've lost tens of thousands of men, hundreds, if not thousands, of different vehicles, armored and civilian in these assaults. The slaughtering of Ukrainian servicemen continues on the ledge in between Donetsk and Zaporozhye, with once again little to no success anywhere. And the Ukrainians really invested in this. They really went with this, and that leaves areas like Kharkov extremely exposed. They don't have the combat effective fighters that they need in this region. They were all brought over for the offensive, and now the Russians are just taking advantage of that. They're moving very slow, very cautiously, but they are making steady progress day after day. It's getting close to 100 kilometers of territory that they have now recaptured in the LPR Kharkov area. And this is the red push. I mean, this is the Russians are going to come through. They are very, very, very strong. They have very well rested and mobile reserves in this area, and they are going to, I believe, take back the territory in between the Zhybyets River and the Oskal River and push down towards Izium. Izium is a big goal. Obviously, Liman is going to come first, but as we've seen, if they don't have the servicemen to defend the LPR and Kharkov area, and they need to withdraw, eventually all the lines are going to start getting weaker and weaker and weaker because they are just not replacing these men that they are losing, and the men that they are replacing are, green. They're not trained to the right standards. Even the guys that were set aside for this offensive don't seem to be trained to a high enough standard. The Ukrainian army that started this conflict had been rotating through Donbass for 8 years. So, a lot of their army was very combat experienced. They were not, afraid to get their hands dirty. They were a very, very decent army, and now it is a shadow of its former self, and we can see it almost everywhere on the battlefield. I've been thinking about how this conflict is going to end, and recently I've been really considering how the West wanted it to end, and I went over a little bit of a timeline in my head, and for the counteroffensive, I believe that the counteroffensive was supposed to start from June 4th to June 10th and 11th. They were supposed to make an immense amount of progress, just like they had in the Kharkov offensive. They had blown the Novokakhovka Dam. In my opinion, they blew it. They filled up the reservoir. The dam blew. And they just didn't achieve those results. So there was a NATO summit in Lithuania on the 11th, And I believe that that was supposed to present an opportunity for the West. I think that they were going to look at this crushing offensive that had broken the Russian lines and the Russians were in disarray. And at that summit, they would have laid out a pathway for Ukraine to join NATO. I honestly believe that's what they were going to do, probably commit more to the Ukraine project on the back of this success, showing everybody, hey, look, we can do this, we're doing it, and now we're going to give Ukraine more money so they can continue doing it. And that didn't pan out. Fast forward 2 months through failure, and you're looking at the Saudi Arabia led negotiations that do not involve Russia, which is a very interesting point that I would like everybody to remember. Russia was not involved in this. And that was between Ukraine, Saudi Arabia, some other member states, I believe, and America. And it wasn't really so much negotiations. I think that's what they kind of played it off as, is like an attempt to, get a good understanding between all of the parties involved of what Ukraine wanted at the negotiation table. And I believe that this whole Saudi Arabia event was supposed to be a part of that massive victory that happened earlier in June and had continued all the way through the summer up until, August, early August. I think that the West thought that the Russians would be stuck in Crimea. Putin would be in an awful position. Negotiations would be almost mandatory at that point. And none of that panned out. So you see this really impotent, kind of a cuck sort of situation where all of these countries are all sitting around pretending like they have some room to negotiate without Russia, even though Russia's in the position of strength. And even all of the allies, I guess you would call them, could not agree on what to do, what concessions to make to Russia, because at this point, they're going to have to make concessions. Russia didn't lose anything in this massive counteroffensive. If you believe the Russian numbers, it's topping off at 45,000 men dead or wounded in action and dead beyond, the ability to return to combat, which is significant. I mean, that is at least 1/3 of the entire offensive force that was dedicated to this. Obviously, the 60,000 NATO trained troops that made up the corps, and then additional Ukrainian reserves that were there to bolster that offensive. So, trying to negotiate without Russia when Russia's in the place of strength it's just not. How could it possibly work? It's a fool's errand. I mean, I laughed at it the second I saw it. I said, "Oh yeah, Russia's not going. Okay, well then, what's the point?" And the point was that the Ukrainians would have been winning or won almost, and then they could dictate terms. They could, the allies would come together. They would leave out Russia. They would offer this negotiation, say, look, you're going to get this, or you're not going to get this. You're going to withdraw. Everything's over. You need to pack it up and leave, whatever it was. And it didn't happen. And so everybody's standing around with their, what's in their hands and can't agree on anything. It really looked like a clown show, this summit in Saudi Arabia. I think it was in Saudi Arabia. It was led by Saudi Arabia. They were the main negotiating group, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't Saudi Arabia, but nothing came out of it. And now we're looking at a Russian offensive in the north, desperation strikes by Kiev on, civilian tankers, trying to just create distractions anywhere they can. There was recently an industrial, what I believe to be now slightly military, but you would call it industrial sabotage within Moscow, left a pretty big mushroom cloud. I'll post that up right here. But all of these things are just little pinprick attacks and just distractions. And if you watch the information space as closely as I do, you'll see that the pro-Ukrainian crowd will instantly gravitate to these massive events. They're blown out of proportion. Just because it's happening in Moscow, it's a big deal. And nobody's focusing on the front line where the Ukrainians are getting their asses handed to them left and right. The Russians are making progress where the Ukrainians are supposed to be making progress. It's really not a good look, and they're doing anything and everything they can to take attention away from the battlefield. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up for Ukraine. I wanted to also bring up the Africa situation because I had talked about it recently. The situation in Niger has deteriorated since the last time I talked. The Senate had denied Nigeria the ability to deploy troops into Niger. I don't exactly know how they've overcome that because I haven't seen anything about the Senate approving it. I don't know if martial law is going to be declared by the president. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how the internal politics work in these countries so well to know what they're going to do. But from the sounds of it, and from the actions that we're seeing, it more than likely looks like there will be some sort of conflict. These military juntas in Boca Fresco, or I can't remember the country, and Mali and Niger are all teaming up, and they are beginning to get hit by sanctions from the West. I think a sanctions package is coming next week, which is going to really hurt these African countries that are already struggling. Niger has closed its airspace to any flights coming in and out, obviously, except what they want to come in and out. And the French have violated this closed airspace, which is a pretty big deal. The Nigerians Nigerians from Niger are claiming that the French have actually hit a border guard post or something of that nature. It wasn't exactly clear. We don't have any actual evidence for this, so we don't know if it actually happened. There's a lot of propaganda going back and forth. It's hard to tell. Wagner is in country. There are supposedly Wagner and Niger special forces protecting the presidential palace and the capital city. So it looks like they're gearing up. And from the rhetoric from the Nigerian side, Nigerians, they are talking about needing a week to set up for an intervention. So, more than likely, it is now appearing like something's going to happen. And really the icing on the cake is that they got the kiss of death from Victoria Nuland. Anytime something's about to happen in a country, we saw it with Sudan, we saw it in almost every country where there's violence that erupts. Pakistan, we see it all the time. Victoria Nuland shows up. She tries to do some negotiations. The negotiations fall apart. And then 2 weeks to a month later, we have a civil war. We have an invasion. We have, something going on. A rebellion, a revolution, something. It always happens like that. So Victoria Nuland's kiss of death is now on Niger. I'm looking at this very closely because it now appears like there will be an armed conflict. And I think really the key is, how does Russia react? How embedded is Wagner? How do the French react? Does the U.S. get involved? And really, how does the African Union respond to this? Because you have multiple different organizations at play here. You have the military juntas who are in a belt, sort of, and through Middle Africa, Midwest Africa, and they are all a part of the West African Economic Cooperation Group that's actually threatening. I think it's Ewoks, who which is like a Star Wars thing, right? Which are threatening the invasion. And then you also have the African Union, which is a separate, larger entity, which all of these countries are also a part of. And there's just so many things, so many different variables at play, so many different people talking, dignitaries going left and right. It's just hard to keep track of everything. You have France, you have the United States, you have, what is Russia going to do? What is Algeria going to do? Algeria has said they do not support an intervention in the country. They think it would be a terrible idea. And they have made some sort of veiled threats about what will happen if somebody invades. You also have Egypt, in the area. I mean, far away, but they're still a part of this sphere of influence. And who knows? It's going to be very interesting to see how it goes down. I hope it's peace. I hope there's no war. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. The forecast for the global situation does not appear very bright to me. We're looking at potentially armed conflict. I mean, we do have an armed conflict in Ukraine that continues to escalate after a year and a half. There's people, I mean, it is getting so wound up. Everybody's waiting to kind of see what's going to happen there. It could just freeze, or if the West if that's the only thing that the West can manage is to freeze it, or if the Russians actually get aggressive, it may be wrapped up, which I think would almost be better, because that could prevent the West from getting the idea that Russia's weak, we can defeat them, we can beat them, whatever, which is what we don't want. And then you have places like Africa that are getting hot. You have places like Israel and Lebanon, which are warm. Syria, obviously, is always there. You have actually Azerbaijan and Armenia have been relatively quiet, which is nice. Serbia and Kosovo is always, on the table. It's just, it feels like the beginning of like World War II, where it didn't happen. And when you read a textbook, World War II seems like it happened overnight. One day the war just started. Germany just invaded Poland, if that's where you consider World War II to have started. For someone like me, I more think that World War II started when the Chinese invaded Manchuria. I think that is when the actual World War began. That was what kicked it off. That was the beginning phases of World War II. And it was this slow buildup over the 30s into the 40s before, or late 39 is when, 39 is when Hitler invaded Poland. But building up to that, there were all of these things happening. And I kind of believe that is what Ukraine is, and whatever the next conflict is will be like, Hitler annexing the Sudetenland. It's not like it might not seem like a big deal, but it's just the next step. And like I said, I hope that that's not the case, but that's kind of the way I'm starting to lean. It seems like all parties are eager for it. Nobody really seems to be backing down. It just feels like it's lining up, and let's just pray that it doesn't. But yeah, I think that's what I'm going to leave it today, guys. Sorry to get a little depressing there at the end, but I appreciate you watching. It's a little late, so I'm a little tired. I hope I managed this podcast okay. If you guys wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, it's the easiest way you can help me out. Share the video, do whatever you got to do. Just get it done. I appreciate you all so much, and I will talk to you soon next time, whenever. Bye.